Hi, welcome to Vishnu IAS. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mithun. I have done my Masters in English Language and Literature from Kerala University. I have been in the field of teaching for more than 12 years. I've been teaching in Hyderabad for more than 11 years. Now I deal with the verbal part of CSAT, English. Now I teach at many institutes. Now we'll discuss, we'll go for an orientation to the verbal part of CSAT. It means what all we have to discuss, we have to go for in the verbal part of examination and how we are planning to go forward. Now when it comes to CSAT English, and as you know in the CSAT paper, we have 80 questions and the paper is for 200 marks. Then the verbal part of CSAT, we're going to focus only on these two, reading comprehension and logical reasoning. Now, there will not be any question on grammar or vocabulary in the examination. Questions in the verbal part will be based on these two sections, reading comprehension and logical reasoning. Now, as you know, the last year, there was not even a single question on reading comprehension. All the questions were on logical reasoning. Whereas in 2020, there was not even a single question on logical reasoning. All the questions were on reading comprehension. So we don't know how the paper is going to be this year. So we're going to focus on both reading comprehension and logical reasoning. And these two, reading comprehension and logical reasoning, come under the section called verbal. Reading comprehension, logical reasoning come under verbal logic. Now what do you mean by the word logic? Logic means what? Now logic refers to making sense. And verbal logic questions are intended to test our reasoning ability. Both reading comprehension and logical reasoning test our reasoning ability. Now, as these two come under verbal logic, we need to go by some strategies. There are some strategies or concepts that need to be followed while approaching questions on both reading comprehension and logical reasoning. Now, as you know, guesswork will never help us. Guesswork will never help us. We need to have a valid logical reason to eliminate an option or to select an option. Now, before moving on to the exercise on these two, reading comprehension and logical reasoning, I'll take you through all the strategies. Now, there are many strategies to approach reading comprehension and logical reasoning. I'll take you through all the strategies in detail with examples. Now, whenever you learn a rule or a strategy, make sure that you associate every rule or every strategy with an example. Now, we may forget rules, but we may not forget examples. So, with the help of examples, we can easily recollect the rules. As these two come under verbal logic, we have many strategies. So we'll discuss all those strategies before we start with the application part. In our sessions, we'll discuss every exercise, every question, every option based only on the concepts. That means if you say A is the answer, you need to tell me based on which concept is A your answer and based on which concepts are the others not your answers. That means every decision of ours, whether it's selection or elimination, must be based only on the concepts. You know how reading comprehension questions will be. A long passage or a short passage followed by 3 or 4 questions. A logical reasoning question appears this way. A short paragraph followed by a single question. Now we can expect paragraph-based reasoning questions as well as statement-based reasoning questions. Now paragraph-based reasoning means, as I said, a short paragraph followed by a single question. Statement-based reasoning in the sense, a sentence followed by a single question. And if it is paragraph-based reasoning or statement-based reasoning, the concepts or the way of approach remains the same. So we'll start with the concepts on these two, then we'll move on to the exercise on reading comprehension and logical reasoning. First we'll go for something on reading comprehension. After that we'll start with logical reasoning. Now when we approach a question in the verbal part, reading comprehension or logical reasoning, the two things that we need to focus on are, one is understanding the context and the other one is identifying the charge. These are two things that need to be focused on while approaching questions in the verbal part of examination. Now, understanding the context in a sense, the meaning of each and every sentence or each and every idea must be understood best. That is, understanding the context. Identifying the charge in a sense, whether a question or an idea carries a positive charge or a negative charge. These are two things we need to focus on. Now, the way you eliminate options in the case of mathematics using the charge, the same way you can eliminate options in the case of English using the charge. When you take a question, you identify the charge of the question. If the question is positively charged, the answer must also be positively charged. So all the negative options can be eliminated. Similarly, if the question is negatively charged, the answer must also be negatively charged. So all the positive options can be eliminated. Now there are many strategies and concepts that help us understand the context, and there are many strategies that help us identify the charge. So all the concepts we discuss in our sessions will be based on these two, the context and the charge. And based only on the concepts, we'll start solving some questions on reading comprehension and logical reasoning. Now there is a concept by name indicators. This is a very important concept. Now this will surely help us eliminate options while approaching questions in the verbal part of examination. Now this concept is all about identifying the charge of every idea in a sentence. Now an idea can be negatively charged or positively charged. The charge of an idea depends on the context in which the idea appears. So based on the context, with the help of indicators, you must be able to identify the charge of every idea in a sentence. Now in fact, indicators are keywords. They are keywords. Now I'll give you the list of indicators. You need to by heart the list and make sure that you don't miss any indicator while reading. Indicators deserve utmost importance while reading. There are three kinds of indicators, namely contrast, support, and cause and effect. I'll explain you the concepts when we move on to the sessions. I'll give you a list of indicators as well. And most of the options, in the case of reading comprehension and logical reasoning, will be eliminated with the help of this concept, indicators. In fact, keywords. Now, when you go for reading comprehension, you might have been doing reading comprehension exercise in school life itself. What I say is, you should never try to understand the whole passage. Now, at the time of the examination, our concern is not to understand the meaning of the whole passage. There's no need for us to try to understand the meaning of the whole passage. Our task is just to get the answers correct. We must be able to crack the questions with the help of some concepts. So never try to understand the passage. Now, without even trying to understand the whole passage, we must be able to get the answers with the help of some concepts. You can find some concepts mentioned here. I'll just name them. Right? The explanation part will move on to when we start with the sessions. Now, these are the concepts that need to be followed in the case of reading comprehension. Now, the way to approach reading comprehension and logical reasoning is almost the same, in fact, but some differences are there. There will be some types of questions in the case of logical reasoning which don't appear in the case of reading comprehension. So we find some difference in the types of questions, in fact. So as I said, we'll start with reading comprehension, then we'll move on to logical reasoning. These concepts will surely help us eliminate options and get the exact answer. Now, as we are aware of this thing, our task is not to find out the correct answer. Our task is to find out the best answer. Because in some cases, there may be more than one correct answer. So among the correct answers, our task is to find out the best answer. General, specific, ER words and more words, ST words or most words, fact, doubt, model. These concepts need to be followed in the case of verbal logic questions. Now, general in the sense, if you find an option to be general, the mention about that option in the passage must also be general. Now, our focus must be only on the option and the sentence that talks about the option. Only one sentence in the passage will talk about one option. So, you need to identify exactly which sentence in the passage talks about that option. And your focus must be only on that sentence. You need to compare only that sentence with the option and then decide whether to go for it or eliminate it. That means, if you find an option to be general, the mention about that option in the passage must also be general, or else just eliminate it. I'll give you a list of general words with some examples, in fact. Specific. If you find an option to be specific, the mention about that option in the passage must also be specific. If not, just eliminate it. Now, these ER words and more words are termed as comparative degree adjectives. Taller, sharper, fatter, shorter. more intelligent, more beautiful. These words are termed as comparative degree adjectives. In fact, a good knowledge of the rules in the language will surely help us crack questions on reading comprehension and logical reasoning. Now, we will not go for grammar in detail or vocabulary in detail. We will discuss only those important concepts in grammar or vocabulary which will be of help to us while approaching questions on reading comprehension and logical reasoning. Other than that, we will not go for grammar or vocabulary in detail because there will not be any questions on grammar or vocabulary in our examination. If you find a comparative degree adjective in an option, just see whether there is any comparative degree adjective in the passage. If you don't find any comparative degree adjective in the passage, just eliminate that option. Similarly, these ST words are most words: strongest, sharpest, shortest, most beautiful. ST words or most words are termed as superlative degree adjectives. If you find any option containing an ST word or most word, a superlative degree adjective, just see whether there is any superlative degree adjective in the passage. If you don't find any superlative degree adjective in the sentence in the passage that talks about that option, just eliminate that option. Fact. Fact and doubt, these two concepts must be thought about together in fact. If you find any option framed like a fact, just see whether the mention about that option in the passage is also like a fact. If it is not framed like a fact in the passage, just eliminate that option. Doubt. If you find an option framed like a doubt, just see whether the mention about that option in the passage is like a doubt. If it is not framed like a doubt in the passage, just eliminate that option. Now, I'll explain all these concepts with the help of some examples in fact. And you must be able to recollect those examples to recollect the rules in fact. Modal. Now, MODL, it is not termed as model, it's termed as modal. Modals are words that tell us about a compulsory action. Any word that tells us about a compulsory action can be termed as a modal. For example, if I say must, they must come here. Must is a modal because it tells us about a compulsory action. They should come here. Should is a modal. It tells us about a compulsory action. They have to come here. Have to is a modal. He has to come here. Has to is a modal. They need to come here. Need to is a modal. They had to come here. Had to is a modal. Must, should, have to, need to, has to, had to, ought to. They ought to come here. Ought to is a modal. So all these words tell us about a compulsory action. So these words can be termed as modals. And all these words mean the same. The meaning remains the same. Now, if you find any option containing a modal, that means any of these words, just see whether there is any modal in the sentence that talks about that option. If you don't find any modal in that sentence, that means any of these words, if any of these words is not there in that sentence, just eliminate that option. If an option talks about a compulsory action, the sentence that talks about the option must also speak about a compulsory action, or else we just need to eliminate that option. Now, before selecting an option, we need to keep two things in mind, right? And the two things that need to be thought about are, one is the meaning of the option, and the other one is the charge of the option. The meaning and the charge of an option must be the same as the meaning and the charge of the sentence that talks about the option. So we can select an option only if these two are satisfied. Only if the meaning and the charge are satisfied, we can select an option. Or else, we just need to eliminate that option. If the charge is fine, but if the meaning is not, just eliminate it. So these are the concepts that we need to follow while approaching questions on verbal logic. Means questions on reading comprehension and logical reasoning. And I'll explain all these concepts as I said when we move on to our sessions. Then comes the types of questions. Now, in the case of reading comprehension, we need to focus mainly on 5 types of questions. I'll tell you in detail about the types once we complete the concepts and before we start with the application part. When you take a question, you need to identify which type of question it is and then move accordingly. because every type has got its own approach. So it's very important that we identify the exact type, in fact, before moving on to the options. And our task is to answer to the question. We need to understand what exactly the question is asking us to find out. Only after trying to understand that, we need to move on to the options. Because always answer to the question. Now, as I said, in the case of reading comprehension, we need to focus mainly on 5 types of questions. Whereas, in the case of logical reasoning, we need to focus on 9 to 10 types of questions. So you can find a difference, some kind of difference will be there in the case of types of questions on reading comprehension and logical reasoning. So we'll start with the application part only after the completion of the concepts, only after discussing the types of questions. In the case of verbal logic, now in the case of grammar questions, we don't have grammar questions in the examination. If it is a grammar question, that question can be cracked very easily in no time if you're well versed in the rules of the language. But verbal logic questions will surely consume time because we need to think a bit. And we need to try approaching verbal logic questions only with the help of some concepts. As I told you, guesswork will never help us. So in our sessions, in the first 3 sessions, I'll go only for the concepts with examples. I'll tell you how to select options, how to eliminate options as well. Then I'll tell you about the types of questions. And then when it comes to the application part, we'll solve some questions together. I'll tell you how to select or eliminate options. We'll go for some questions together. Then we'll get a lot of practice. You'll get a lot of practice in the sessions itself, in the classroom itself. You should try solving the questions, provided you tell me which rule you used to select an option or to eliminate an option. So every decision of ours, selection or elimination, must be based only on the strategies, especially in the case of verbal logic questions. And as you know, you can get an authority over verbal logic questions only through practice. And then practicing with the help of concepts. So this is what we are planning to go for in the case of the verbal part of the examination. These are the things we need to keep in mind when approaching questions on reading comprehension and logical reasoning, and make sure that you go for the right way of approach. We are starting the CSAT batch on Feb 26th, and 100% clearing intensive prelims batch starts on March 17th. So make sure that you don't waste this opportunity. Make use of the opportunity to make sure that you clear prelims this year itself. As you know, you don't have much time left. We have only some time left. Make sure that you make much use of that time to clear prelims this year itself. So please don't wait. Please join us. Right? Make sure that we are very much dedicated, and whatever we can do to help you reach your goal, we'll be doing from our side, provided your cooperation is there. Thank you.